My adopted daughter replaced me. But what I did 48 hours before her wedding, nobody saw it coming. My daughter called me petty for not wanting her mother's lover at her wedding. She said, "I like him. He's a friend and harmless." When I insisted, she replied, "I guess you leave me no choice but to uninvite you." I said nothing more. What happened next was quite unexpected. I was in the middle of changing a light bulb in the hallway when the mail dropped through the slot with a soft thud. The envelope was cream-colored and heavy, the kind of paper that tries to make up for the lack of substance within. I wasn't expecting anything special that day. Bills, flyers, maybe a coupon or two, but I recognized her handwriting the moment I saw it. My daughter, Claire. She'd always had a soft, rounded script, the same one she used to write me Father's Day notes when she was little, before the world split in two. I held the envelope longer than necessary. I turned it over a couple of times, just looking at my name. Dad, written in her hand like a time capsule from when we still knew how to talk to each other. I opened it slowly, carefully, as if it might explode if I wasn't gentle enough. Inside was a wedding invitation, white cardstock, a floral border, gold lettering. She was getting married. I already knew that from a call months ago. A brief update shared with the enthusiasm of someone checking an item off a to-do list. "We finally set a date," she had said. "I'll send you the details." But I didn't expect the chill I felt reading it now. My name wasn't anywhere on the inside. It didn't say, "Father of the Bride." No, it was just an RSVP card with boxes to check, but what made my blood run cold wasn't the lack of affection. It was the last line of the invitation. "Reception to follow, hosted by Linda and Kevin." Kevin. Her mother's lover. The man who sat across from me in my own dining room years ago and lied to my face without blinking. I stood there for a long time, staring at that name like it was a curse carved in stone. I hadn't heard that name in years. At least, not in my presence. Kevin was the man my wife left me for. The man she claimed was just a friend from work, until she stopped coming home on Thursdays and started picking fights over nothing. When the truth came out, it wasn't explosive, it was quiet, a still betrayal that seeped into every part of my life. She didn't even apologize, just said, "These things happen," and packed her bags. Kevin never said a word to me, not then, not ever. And now, there he was, hosting my daughter's wedding reception as if he were the family patriarch. I called Claire that night. My hands were shaking a little, though I told myself it was from the cold. She answered on the second ring. "Hey, Dad," she said, so naturally, as if nothing had changed. I kept my voice steady. "Claire, I got the invitation." "Congratulations." A silence. "Thanks," she said. I didn't waste time. I noticed Kevin's name on the reception card. Silence. I waited. "Yeah," she said finally. "He and Mom are helping with the venue. They've done a lot of the planning, actually." Her tone was even, unbothered, as if we were discussing flower arrangements. "Claire," I said, choosing my words as if I were defusing a bomb, "I can't be there if he's going to be there." The pause was longer this time. "What do you mean?" she asked. But it wasn't confusion, it was annoyance. I heard it slide into her voice like a knife. "You know what I mean. I can't sit in the same room as him and pretend everything is fine. He isn't a stranger. He's the reason your mother and I couldn't even finish the sentence. She cut me off. "Dad, that was a long time ago. Can't you just get over it?" Her voice turned sharper. Defensive. "He's harmless. He's been really good to Mom and me." That's when I felt something inside me break. Something small but irreversible. The way she said it, as if I were being irrational, petty even. As if I should just bury everything and smile through the pain because it made her life easier. "I'm not asking for much," I said. "I just want to be there for you, but not with him." Another pause. "Well," she said quietly, "I guess you leave me no choice but to uninvite you." It didn't even sound like her. Or maybe it did, and I just hadn't been listening properly until now. I said nothing more. Not a word. I just hung up, placed the phone gently on the kitchen counter, and walked outside. The night air hit my face. I sat on the porch for a long time, trying to understand what had just happened. My own daughter had chosen him not exactly over me, but instead of me. She had made peace with her mother's betrayal, with his presence, and expected me to do the same, as if my pain had an expiration date she could decide on. I didn't go to the wedding. I didn't call. I didn't send a gift. I didn't look at the pictures when mutual friends posted them online. That was the day I walked out of her life and didn't look back. The first week after the call was like falling into a silent film where everyone else was still talking. I went to work, paid my bills, cooked my dinners, but everything felt muted, numb. People talked about football games and their kids, and I would nod, but my mind was stuck on that last call. "He's harmless." That phrase replayed in my head like a nagging commercial. I heard it in her voice, so casual, so dismissive, as if Kevin were some bumbling uncle and not the man who helped dismantle my family behind my back. I pictured Claire at the wedding, laughing alongside him, thanking him for helping with the seating chart or whatever. And then I pictured myself there, awkward, smiling through my teeth, sipping watery whiskey while pretending not to watch the man who replaced me walk her down the aisle. I wanted to believe it was just a bad dream, that Claire would call in a few days to say she'd been emotional, that she'd thought it over and realized how wrong it was to force me into that situation. But the days passed, and my phone remained silent. I didn't call either. There was nothing left to say. If she believed I was being petty, if she truly thought my discomfort was worth less than her need to keep the peace with her mother's new man, then she never really saw me at all. That realization was what hurt the most. Not the wedding, not Kevin, not even my ex-wife's betrayal. No, the real blow was knowing that my daughter had become someone who could look at the rubble of our family and say, "He's harmless." A few nights later, I got a call from my sister, Denise. She'd received her invitation, too. "Are you going?" she asked. I told her no. I gave her the short version. Her voice dropped. "Wait, Kevin's going to be there?" I said yes. "And Claire knows what he did?" I said yes again. There was a long pause. Then she said, "You're doing the right thing." That helped more than I expected. Just hearing someone, anyone, validate that I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't overreacting, gave me something to hold on to. Denise had seen what that affair did to me. She remembered the nights I slept on her couch, red-eyed, with a gym bag of my belongings, too broken to sleep in the house my wife had emotionally emptied months before she physically moved out. She saw who I'd become: quiet, drained, weary. And she knew that wounds like that don't just disappear because a few years pass on the calendar. But not everyone saw it that way. A week after the call with Denise, I got a text from my cousin, Mark. "Heard you're not going to Claire's big day. You should be the bigger person in this, man. Don't ruin things over old grudges." I stared at the message, not knowing whether to laugh or throw the phone against the wall. Old grudges. As if it were a high school feud and not the collapse of a 20-year marriage. I didn't reply. I deleted the message, and then I deleted his number. I didn't need anyone in my life who thought forgiveness meant pretending nothing happened. I'd forgiven a lot of things in my life, more than people know. But forgiving didn't mean submitting. It didn't mean swallowing pain so others could feel more comfortable. Claire had made her choice, and I wasn't going to beg for a seat at a table where I was clearly not welcome. The worst part, though, was how the silence stretched. As the wedding grew closer, I thought maybe she'd send a text, something brief, an olive branch, but nothing came. The day came and went without a single word from her. No call, no picture, no "wish you were here," not even a question of whether I was okay. That, more than anything, confirmed what I needed to know. She had moved on it just from the idea of a nuclear family, but from me. The father who raised her, who drove her to every swim meet, who helped her move into her first college dorm, who taught her how to change a tire in the rain, had been replaced by someone harmless. And that's when the anger came. Not the loud, destructive kind. A quieter, colder rage, the kind that settles in your chest like wet cement and won't let you breathe right. For weeks, I tried to go on as if nothing had happened. I kept my routines. I kept my voice calm when people asked about the wedding and I said I didn't go. Some would nod sympathetically, others would ask why. I'd just say, family stuff. I didn't owe anyone an explanation. But I did owe myself something. I owed myself the dignity of honoring my own pain. The world was full of people pretending to be fine just to keep the peace. I wasn't going to be one of them. Claire had drawn a line in the sand, and for once, I didn't step over it for her. I let her go. I let the wedding happen without me. I let Kevin give his toast and smile in the family photos, and I let myself grieve not just for the daughter I once had, but for the illusion that she would always be on my side. The truth is, sometimes the people you love the most are the ones who fail you the most profoundly. Not because they hate you, but because they don't understand you. And in not understanding you, they dismiss you, they minimize you, they make you feel like your pain is something you should get over for the sake of convenience. But pain doesn't work like that, does it? Real pain doesn't go away because someone decides it's inconvenient. It stays inside until it's acknowledged. And if it never is, it festers. I wasn't going to let that happen. Not again. I'd given too much of myself away for too long. Now it was time to start keeping some for myself. The morning of the wedding, I woke up before dawn. No alarm, no real reason, just my body refusing to rest, as if it sensed something heavy waiting on the other side of the day. I lay there in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering what she was doing at that very moment. Was Claire sipping coffee in a silk robe, surrounded by her bridesmaids? Was she laughing nervously as a makeup artist dabbed foundation on her cheeks? Had she even thought of me that morning, imagined what I'd be wearing if I were there, or what kind of speech I might have given? I didn't expect answers, but the questions buzzed in my head like flies you couldn't swat away. I got up, pulled on a sweatshirt, and made coffee that tasted like nothing. I kept glancing at the clock, trying to guess what part of the ceremony they'd be on. Vows, pictures, toasts. It felt like a wake for someone who was still alive. I didn't leave the house that day. I thought about going fishing. I thought about driving somewhere I'd never been. But in the end, I just sat on my back porch in the shade, listening to the wind move through the leaves of the trees. It was a silent protest, a refusal to pretend I was okay. I didn't want to distract myself. I wanted to feel it. I needed to, even if it burned. Every part of me felt absent, like I'd been erased from a chapter one helped write. I thought about the empty chair that should have been mine at the wedding. The seat reserved for the father of the bride, the man who taught her to ride a bike, who stayed up all night building a dollhouse one Christmas Eve. That chair was now filled by someone else, Kevin. And Claire had made her peace with that. Or maybe she never thought it mattered in the first place. Either way, the message was clear. She didn't need me. As evening fell, I got a call from Jim, an old work friend who'd retired a few years before me. He was one of the few who'd stayed close after the divorce, the kind of guy who doesn't need you to say much to understand what's going on. Heard today was the big day, he said, his voice careful. I didn't answer right away. Yeah, I finally said. It was. Jim didn't try to console me, he let the silence hang for a moment. Then he said, "You sure you did the right thing, not going?" That caught me off guard. He was the last person I expected that question from. You think I should have just smiled and taken it? I asked, more of an edge in my voice than I intended. Jim sighed. I think sometimes you show up for people, even when it hurts. Especially your kids. That stung. Not because he was wrong, but because a part of me had asked myself that same question 100 times. But then I thought about what showing up would have really meant. Me, standing in a crowd, pretending nothing had happened, watching Kevin get handed the microphone for his speech, smiling in the family photos while I swallowed every ounce of dignity I had left. Was that being the bigger person? Sacrificing yourself on the altar of someone else's comfort? Showing up is easy when you're not the one being erased, I told him. You don't ask the wounded man to applaud the one who shot him. Jim was quiet for a long moment, and then he said, "Fair enough," and didn't bring it up again. I was grateful for that. He didn't agree, but he didn't push. Sometimes that's the best thing someone can do for you, give you space without trying to fix anything. A few days later, Denise showed up unannounced with a casserole dish covered in foil and a folder of wedding photos someone had sent her. She didn't ask if I wanted to see them, she just sat down at my kitchen table and slid the folder across like it was evidence in a trial. "You should see what you missed," she said, not cruelly, just honestly. I opened the folder, half out of curiosity, half out of a masochistic need to confirm I'd made the right choice. Claire looked beautiful, radiant even. Her dress was simple, elegant. Her smile was the same one she wore in her high school graduation photos. But what tightened my stomach was the picture of Kevin standing next to her, a hand resting lightly on her shoulder. His tie matched the wedding party's colors. He wasn't just there, he was a part of it, integrated, accepted. And I was nowhere. Denise leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. "You should have been there," she said, her voice softer now. "If only to remind her that you're still her father." I didn't look up. "She knows who I am," I replied. "She just decided it didn't matter." Denise watched me for a long time, searching for something. Or maybe she's just young and doesn't get it yet. Maybe one day she'll look back and realize what she lost. I shrugged. Or maybe she won't. We didn't talk for a while, just sat there in the quiet, as if the stillness were a fog settling in. She didn't push. She just heated up the lasagna and made 2 plates. We ate in silence, and I was grateful for it. That night, I dug through my drawer and found a letter Claire had written me for my birthday when she was 13. It was neatly folded, written in the same rounded script I'd recognized on the wedding envelope. "You're the best dad in the world. I don't know what I'd do without you." I read it twice, then put it back in the drawer. People change. Love fades. Loyalties shift. But I hadn't changed. I hadn't forgotten what it meant to be a father. I had just stopped begging to be treated like one. That distinction mattered. Maybe not to everyone, but it mattered to me. It had been just over 2 years since I'd last heard her voice. Long enough for the silence to harden into a habit, for the ache to fade into something more manageable, like an old injury that only hurts when it rains. I didn't think about her every day anymore. Just on some birthdays, holidays, days when I'd see a father and daughter laughing in the grocery store and something in my chest would twist without warning. But I had stopped expecting anything. That was the real difference. The pain hadn't left, but the hope had. And with it, finally, I began to feel free. Not happy, not healed, just at peace with the absence. Some holes don't close, you just learn to walk around them. I was doing laundry when the call came. My phone buzzed on top of the dryer, her name lighting up the screen like a ghost I wasn't ready to face. I stared at it for a long second, my thumb hovering over the screen. Part of me wanted to let it go to voicemail, to stay in the silence we had both chosen. But another part, the one that still remembered her singing off-key in the back seat at age 5, couldn't ignore it. I answered. "Hello," I said, my voice flat. There was a beat of silence. "Hi, Dad." Her voice was thin, shaky. I knew immediately something was wrong. Not just emotionally wrong. Really wrong. "What's going on?" I asked, more firm than concerned. Another pause. Then the floodgates opened. "I messed up," she said, the words tumbling out as if she'd been holding them in for days. "I left Scott. I'm a mess. I'm behind on rent, and my car is about to be repossessed. I don't know who else to call." I didn't say anything. My chest tightened. Not with anger, not yet, but with the sheer strangeness of hearing from her again, of hearing that mix of panic and desperation. She went on. "I know I don't deserve your help. I know. I know what I did. But please, I just need something to get back on my feet." I still didn't speak. I let the silence sit. She had filled the air so easily before with excuses and explanations. Now she had to feel what it was like to wait for someone else's mercy. Finally, I said, "Did you call Kevin first?" I heard her breath catch. "What?" I repeated it slowly. "You said he was harmless. That he was good to you and your mother. Did you call him?" Another silence. Then a soft, almost inaudible, "No." I leaned back against the dryer, my heart pounding but my voice calm. "Well, maybe it's time you did. He was good enough to stand by you on your wedding day. He was good enough to replace me. So go to him. Ask your mother's boyfriend for help." Her voice cracked. "Dad, please." I didn't know what I was doing back then. I just didn't want to cause drama. That word again. Drama. The word people use when they don't want to deal with consequences. I swallowed. "You didn't want to cause drama, so you erased me. That was your choice, Claire. This is mine." Then she started to cry. Not loud sobs, but small, choked sounds, as if she were trying to hold back a flood. And for a second, just one, I almost caved. I almost said yes, because I remembered the little girl who clung to my hand in parking lots, who wrote me notes with hearts in the margins. But then I remembered the silence, the wedding, the photos, the empty chair. I remembered how easily she dismissed me, how she told everyone I was the difficult one, how she let a man who helped destroy our family play the part one had spent her whole life preparing for. And I knew. I knew if I bailed her out now, she wouldn't learn anything. It would just confirm what she'd always believed, that I would take the hits and carry the weight to keep her afloat. "I'm sorry you're going through this," I said, my voice like steel. "But I'm not the man you call when everything falls apart." "You decided that." There was a pause, then a whisper. "You're really not going to help me?" I took a deep breath. Not for anger, but for self-control. "No, Claire. Not this time." She didn't say anything else. She just hung up. No goodbye, no insults, just the sound of a call ending. I stood there in the quiet, phone still in hand, my heart beating like I'd just run a marathon. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt tired. Tired and empty and strangely proud that I hadn't given in. Later that night, I told Denise about the call. She listened without interrupting, her gaze hard. "Good," she said when I finished. "You finally stopped being her doormat." The word stung a little, but she wasn't wrong. For years, I gave Claire the benefit of the doubt. I allowed her to rewrite history, to minimize the betrayal, to paint me as the problem. I let her believe that I was the one making everything difficult. But I wasn't difficult, I was just honest. And no one in that family wanted honesty. They wanted quiet compliance disguised as love. Not anymore. I would not play that role again. Claire needed to grow through this on her own. Maybe she would, maybe she wouldn't. But I was done being her safety net. The next day, I saw a missed call from a number I didn't recognize and a voicemail. It was Claire again. Her voice was calmer now, but cold. "I get it. You've made your point. Just so you know, you'll never hear from me again." I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the phone as if it had become a weapon. She thought this was a punishment, that her silence would hurt me more than anything. And maybe 2 years ago, it would have. But not now. Now, it felt like confirmation that I'd done the right thing. I had saved myself. For once, I had chosen me. The first sign that the silence wouldn't last came 3 days later in the form of a Facebook comment. I'd posted a picture of my dog, Max, chasing a squirrel in the backyard. It was a light, forgettable thing, just a quiet slice of a quiet life. But underneath the post was a comment from my cousin, Angela. Glad to see you're doing so well while your daughter's life is falling apart. I stared at it for a long minute, that old tightness forming in my chest. The internet had a way of amplifying things that should have stayed private, like shouting personal business through a megaphone at a funeral. I deleted the comment, blocked her, and leaned back in my chair with a long, weary sigh. I knew that wouldn't be the end of it. When a man sets a boundary, they call him cold. When a father sets a boundary, they call him heartless. By the end of the week, I'd received 3 voicemails and 2 texts from distant family members, none of whom had bothered to check on me in years, now acting as if they were on a moral mission to correct my cruelty. One message from my Aunt Maureen almost made me laugh, if it hadn't been so outrageous. "She's still your blood," she said. "Don't let pride stop you from being a father." Pride. That word rang in my ears like an insult, as if my entire stance was about ego and not about finally refusing to be used. Not a single person who called me ever asked what it felt like to be publicly erased at your own daughter's wedding. They didn't know how Claire had looked at me as if I were a broken vase, sentimental, maybe, but no longer useful. No, all they saw now was a man who said no when a woman cried. And for some reason, that is always the greater sin. I started leaving my phone on silent. It was easier that way, letting the calls pile up like leaves in the yard. Annoying, yes, but easy to ignore if you didn't look right at them. I didn't need that noise. I didn't need the emotional blackmail disguised as concern. I needed space. I needed quiet to sort through the debris in my own mind, to remind myself over and over that saying no was not an act of betrayal. It was an act of self-preservation. I had spent too much of my life tying my worth to what I could do for others. First my wife, then my daughter. And for what? To be called inconvenient the second I stopped being compliant. No, I wouldn't go back to that life. I would not set myself on fire to keep someone else warm. That Sunday, I was outside washing my truck when my neighbor, Gerald, walked over. Gerald was one of those older guys who doesn't say much, but when he speaks, it usually matters. He stood there for a moment, watching me rinse off the dust. Then he said, "Heard about Claire?" I tensed. "From who?" He shrugged. "People talk. My niece is friends with someone who knows your ex's circle." I sighed, bracing for judgment. But Gerald didn't lecture me. He just leaned against the fence, his arms crossed. "You did what you had to do," he said. "Sometimes being a father means letting your kids learn how to stand up without you to lean on. Hardest damn thing in the world. But sometimes the right thing is the hardest damn thing." His words settled over me like a warm coat after a cold wind. I nodded, not trusting my voice to say much. He patted the fence. "You're not a bad man, Tom. Don't let people who don't know the whole story act like they do." Then he walked back to his porch, leaving me with more clarity than I'd gotten from anyone else in weeks. It wasn't validation I'd been craving, it was understanding. And that brief exchange with Gerald felt like the first time someone saw the whole picture, not just the sharp, scattered pieces on the floor. That night, I sat down at my kitchen table and opened a fresh notebook. I started writing. Nothing elaborate, just thoughts, confessions, fragments of moments I hadn't allowed myself to process. I wrote about the day Claire was born, about how terrified I was to hold her, how small she felt in my arms. I wrote about the nights helping her with homework, about her crying over math tests and high school drama. I wrote about the moment I realized she wasn't mine anymore, not in a possessive sense, but in that quiet, sad way all parents know when their child starts choosing who they want to be. And I wrote about the wedding, the invitation, about Kevin. I wrote until my hand ached and my eyes burned. And still, I didn't feel done, because the truth was, even in all my anger, there was still grief. Grief for the relationship I thought we had. Grief for the future. I had imagined one where I gave a speech at her wedding, where we danced to a Motown song like we used to do in the kitchen when she was 10. I hadn't just lost a daughter, I had lost a version of myself I thought was permanent. The father who could fix anything. The father who was always chosen. Letting go of that illusion was like tearing off a second skin. Painful, but necessary. I needed to stop mourning a relationship that never really existed in the way I believed it did. She hadn't betrayed me so much as she had revealed who she was when loyalty required discomfort. I didn't cry that night. I didn't feel the need to. Instead, I sat in the silence and listened to the hum of the refrigerator, the occasional creak of the old house settling around me. I thought of all the noise people had been making, family, friends, even strangers. And then I thought of Gerald's words. Sometimes the right thing is the hardest damn thing. He was right. This wasn't about pride. It wasn't about revenge. It was about finally drawing a line in the sand that said, this is where I stop disappearing for people who claim to love me. It was early spring when the letter arrived, tucked between grocery store coupons and credit card offers. I almost missed it at first. The envelope was plain, the address handwritten in a rushed, uneven script I didn't immediately recognize. But as soon as I opened it and saw how the ink pooled at the edges of the letters, as if it had been written in one fast, angry, fearful go, I knew it was from Claire. She hadn't contacted me in months, not since the voicemail promising I'd never hear from her again. Part of me thought she meant it. Another part, one I'd buried under pride and survival, had waited quietly like a dog lying by a closed door, not because I needed her, but because I had once loved her so fiercely it left a permanent mark on everything that came after. The letter wasn't long, barely more than a page, written in blue ink with a small coffee stain in the corner. It didn't apologize, at least not in the way people expect. There was no, "I'm sorry for what I did." There was no clean admission of guilt. But there was something raw in the way she wrote. I didn't realize how far I'd pushed you away until you stopped coming back. I thought I was choosing peace, but I was just choosing convenience. That sentence sat heavy in my chest. I read it 3 times. It might not have been an apology in the traditional sense, but it was the first time she'd acknowledged the cost of her choices, not just to me, but to herself. She didn't ask for money. She didn't ask for a second chance. She didn't even ask for a reply. She just said, "I wanted you to know I still think about you. I still remember how safe it felt to be your daughter." I didn't know what to do with that. I folded the letter and put it in the drawer where I kept the old Father's Day cards, the elementary school drawings, the birthday note she'd written when she was 13. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just sat there, letting the words hang in the air like smoke. Maybe this was as close to a reconciliation as I was ever going to get. And maybe that was okay. The truth was, I didn't need her to grovel. I didn't need her to come back begging and saying she was wrong. I just needed her to understand that loving someone doesn't give you permission to hurt them and then call it maturity when you ask them to stay quiet about it. A few weeks later, I ran into a woman named Elisa at the hardware store. She was an old friend of Denise's, someone I'd known by sight for years but had barely ever spoken to. We got to talking while waiting in line to pay for mulch, of all things. She asked how I'd been, and I gave the standard polite answer. Can't complain. Taking things one day at a time. Then she tilted her head and said, "You know, I heard what happened with Claire. People love to talk. But I think what you did took real strength. My father never stood up for himself. He died bitter and quiet. I think about that a lot." I didn't say anything right away. I just nodded slowly, because it suddenly hit me that this was the real outcome. Not the silence, not the judgment from those who never knew the whole story, but the quiet moments when a stranger recognizes something true in your actions. The moments when someone says, unprompted, you did the right thing, even when it hurt. That conversation stayed with me for days. Not because I needed validation, but because it reminded me that integrity often comes with loneliness. Not everyone will applaud your boundaries. Not everyone will understand why you walked away. But the ones who do, the ones who see the cost and still say, good for you, those are the voices worth listening to. For the first time in a long time, I felt proud. Not for being strong, but for being honest. For choosing peace over appearances. For refusing to play the part of the martyr when all it had ever gotten me was more pain. On Father's Day, I expected nothing. I made myself breakfast, walked Max around the block, and spent most of the afternoon in the garage organizing tools I almost never use. Around 3 p.m., there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find a small package on the welcome mat. No card, no note, just a box wrapped in brown paper and tied with twine. Inside was a picture frame, a photo of Claire and me from years ago at her middle school graduation ceremony, her arms around my neck, both of us laughing. There was a post-it on the back. Found this while clearing out boxes. Thought you should have it. That was it. Nothing dramatic, nothing elaborate. Just a gesture. A quiet one, but enough. I placed the photo on the mantel, next to a small clock and a ceramic dog Claire had made in 2nd grade. I stood there for a long time, hands in my pockets, looking at the past frozen in that frame. I didn't call her. I didn't write back. Not because I didn't care, but because I finally understood that closure doesn't always come in conversations or apologies. Sometimes it comes in the simple act of holding your ground, of standing in your truth without begging to be understood. I could love her from a distance. I could hope she would heal without sacrificing myself to make it happen. People talk a lot about forgiveness as if it's a single moment, a decision you make once and move on. But for me, it was something quieter, a process, a slow softening. Not letting go of the past, but letting go of letting it rule every thought. I didn't hate Claire. I didn't wish her harm. I just finally accepted that she might never fully understand what she had taken from me, and I didn't need her to. I was no longer the man begging for a seat at someone else's table. I had built my own. And the chair across from me would stay empty until someone worthy chose to sit in it.